Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. We are here with Alan, who got second place at Australian Nationals with Green Cooler of all decks. I would have never guessed it in a million years, but Alan did a really incredible thing. What's going on, Alan? How you doing?
Doing pretty well. Yeah, thanks for having me on the channel. Feels pretty good doing so well with Green Cooler, honestly.
Awesome, man. I'm glad to have you here. So first things first, why did you want to play this deck?
I wanted to play Cooler because I feel like amongst all the green decks, it probably had the best matchup into red, and that was the one I'd for the most. And the reason I'd say this is because it's the only deck that can reliably maintain a unison with high enough markers, and so you can threaten not only the charismatic villain, but also the deck's own exclusive charismatic villain, Salsa. And red just doesn't like facing down charismatic villain nor Salsa because it doesn't have too many barrier threats. And also, it's the best user of Dormant Potential Unleashed in combination with the Golden Freezer. That is, you can block the attack that you dormant, and your opponent, you only have to deal with one attack for the rest of the turn. And also, the Golden Freezer is immune to Smoke Dragon, so your opponent can't even try to turn off the dormant.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I actually leads into my next question. So obviously, yeah, Frieza, like you said, is immune to Smoke Dragon. But how does Smoke Dragon feel against you in general? Because I think like Smoke Dragon's really annoying for a Unison based deck, but at the same time, you only really invest like one energy into a Unison that's not Golden Frieza. So you're kind of winning out on that energy exchange. So with all that consideration, like how do you feel about Smoke Dragon in general? Is it just not that big of a deal, or is it kind of annoying? What do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's not too big of a deal. I have had like turns where after my turn too, where they Smoke Drag my Unison and use my leader skill to play out another Unison uptick it before I play the Golden Freezer. It, I guess, can like stop a draw that way, but overall it's not too big of a deal because my aim is to get the Golden Freezer on board pretty early, as early as possible, so it can just like help me stabilize whiteboard and it's a pretty good blocker.
Gotcha. So a lot of times you'll just play Golden Frieza turn 3 if you can.
Yeah, yes. If I can, like, I'll just use my leader skill to play a Unison and then play the Golden Freezer.
Gotcha. Very cool. So one question I want to ask, because this is always something with green players: are you like traditionally a green player, or was this like a deck you just kind of metagamed? I know you talked about like you feel like it has a good red matchup, but did you pick this deck because of that, or were you kind of already like a green player?
I guess yeah, I was always a bit of a green player. I just like the slight elements of hand control, board control, and the Freezer charismatic villain.
Very cool. All right, with that all out of the way, let's go into the main board. So we have our Unison lineup. We have Dore, which gives you a bit of draw power. Yeah, like you said, having 2 copies of charismatic villain, or I guess 8 copies of charismatic villain, is definitely really insane. Knees is also just like randomly good. I think just being able to stun a certain attacker is really solid. Having a 1 energy negate that draws a card is really solid. And then Cell Max, like I think the Unison stuff's all kind of self-explanatory, but Cell Max, like you really did show a lot of people that this card can be a force to be reckoned with, because turn 3 player Unison, then if you're able to awaken, follow up that dual attack triple strike with the 40k quad strike. Would you say this is like I don't know, an aggro deck or a control deck? How would you classify this deck with this card and the way you kind of play it?
I'd call this like a kind of like a mid-range aggro deck, more pivoting on the aggro side, but it obviously depending on like which deck the aggressor is really dependent on the matchup. So like against red decks, you kind of do have to take a bad backseat and just lean into more mid-range game. Whereas like against like slower blue decks, you can happily go the more aggro route with like getting early pokes with Unison, and then later on finishing off with like your big Golden Freezer Unison and the Faded Rifles.
Gotcha. And then actually that kind of backtracks me to the question I should have asked a minute ago, but we talked about the red matchup a little bit. Let's talk about the Crimson matchup, because Crimson has now kind of just become the most popular deck, it seems like. So you mentioned just a second ago being aggressive with blue decks, but my teammate Marcus that played against you, he mentioned how you were like very stally. You actually weren't attacking him that much, and that's actually a really good strategy because you're able to deny Crimson's ability to cycle cards and put Sands in the drop. So how do you kind of approach the Crimson matchup in a general sense?
Yeah, so in day 1 of Swiss, I wasn't attacking them a lot, but I was just attacking them to get the leader draw.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think 2 of my losses in Swiss were to Crimson, and that's because I played the matchup differently. I attacked them to get leader draw, and I found that in doing so, they were able to get Awaken on their turn 3, and that was a massive momentum shift that I couldn't handle really well because their main attacker is the new SR Piccolo, and that has barrier, and like none of my unison cards like the Salsa or the Freezer or even the Neat can really deal with that very effectively. So they were able to output a lot of pressure on me turn 3 and whittle down my hand before I could like fully stabilize. Yeah, so I guess that's why I changed my strategy up into just not attacking them, and also I guess Cooler Cooler's has a cost to take a life in order to draw a card, and that's also not great when you're getting aggroed. When you're getting aggroed.
Right. So that is really interesting though, because you're giving up your, source of gaining card advantage just to try to win that matchup, which is a very interesting dynamic. I don't think a lot of people would think about, not attacking with their leader. Like, what are you, crazy? Like, I need to get my draws. But in this sense, it seems like it worked out pretty well for you. So yeah, that's kind of the strategy.
Yeah.
Then. Not really attacking with leader, not really attacking much at all, and kind of just whittling their hand down.
Yeah, I did that in Top Cut, and I did a lot better in my Crimson matchups, I'd say, because I think by doing that, I got them. They're normally waking on turn 4. I think against Marcus once, like he didn't draw super well, and because I was playing the slower thing, he even wakened on like turn 5 or turn 6. And just by doing that, like Green's threats, this time around, actually scale pretty well. Like the Faded Rivals, is more of a mid-game, late-game play, but it's insane amount of pressure for 3 energy. And Golden Freezer being a dual attack triple strike as well also lends to that. Like you don't mind going into the late game because you have some pretty solid offense and also some pretty like non-interactable defense with Dorman.
Yeah, and let's talk about this 9-card package here, because over the last 2 sets, like generic green has gotten some really big buffs, right? So we have our 3 copies of Gohan Latent Power, so you're able to just like snipe just about any unison in the game. I mean, would you say that it's fair to assume that unisons just don't live against you?
Yeah, pretty much. Although I would say that a lot of unisons, you have to kill them the turn that they're played.
Right, sometimes, or otherwise they get out of control.
Get a bit out of. Yeah. So I think like this Gohan was here just to clear the unisons, like mainly like the SS4 Gogeta unison, in red, like the teaming up unison in gamma, and any of like the other blue unisons that blue likes to play.
Yeah, did you face out a lot of blue unisons this weekend or not really?
No one dropped a blue unison on me. It was a shame. I was ready for it.
Yeah, I was curious about that because obviously Andrew in America, his list didn't even play Boo, but I still think Boo is probably really strong in Crimson. But yeah, this card, obviously a 1-card Boo killer, is pretty insane. And then the Faded Rivals, just incredible pressure. One thing I do want to ask though, some people have concerns with like, not having enough Saiyans or not having enough Namekians to like actually play Goku. So here you have what? You have 3 Piccolos, you have 3 Gohans, and you have your super combos. So that kind of feel like enough for you?
Yeah, overall felt like enough because Faded Rivals normally comes around on turn 4, and you're normally awakened by then, so you can happily fire off the super combo, or you've like sniped a unison with the SGR. So normally it hasn't this has felt like enough for me. Yeah.
Gotcha. And yeah, this combo like this Gohan adds so much to the Faded Rivals combo, because like you said, it's the Saiyan for you to bottom deck, and that actually puts it back into your deck to maybe use again, which is funny. But also, like, this guy doesn't have Deflect, so he's a little bit weak to, like, God Sealing, for example, but that's not even a problem, because Gohan just kills the unison anyway. So yeah, this whole, like, 9-card engine is just, like, so good, like, with itself. Like, that's really good. And then, yeah, for the main board, 3 Homicidal, definitely seems legit. 1 Champa, 1 Dark Broly, 1 Bardock. Is there anything about the main board you would consider changing after the weekend?
I think like because I didn't come across too many red, I would consider cutting down 1 SGR. Like, I probably want to get it to a tight 50, ideally. But yeah, that's probably would be the main change in the main board. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, going down to the Z deck, we have our 1 Surmounting. Just, every deck pretty much plays it. Nothing to say there. But now, I think the green Z deck is typically a little bit weird, right? So, 3 copies of Frieza. How often were you going into this guide to get the extra discards?
Hardly ever. Like, I don't like my like Goku Faded Rival is my Z energy. It's like the main card I play that needs a Z energy.
Yeah, it kind of sucks that green's best Z card is actually in the main deck. You actually have to draw it, but I mean, it's still really powerful, so it is what it is. And then Jiren the Immovable, the infamous card of the finals, but still like an insanely high power card, right? Do you find
Yeah.
this deck makes enough Z energy to like make good use of the activate main?
I feel like you can get enough energy if you're like, I guess, getting pressured. Because when you just call combo out of like small 15k attacks, you will accumulate enough Z energy. But other than that, if you follow through your normal plan of like dormant and like block and like hopefully negate, then there's not really, you don't really build up that much Z energy because you're not comboing out of things.
Right. That makes sense. But yeah, still a really, really good Z card. I'm glad Green did get a really good Z card in set 19 because yeah, there was definitely lacking before. And then one Goku awakened by Rage. So this makes a lot of sense, even though people might say, oh, this doesn't really work if you're not a Goku leader. But it's basically just a 15k attacker that has protection. Is that kind of what you thought of with this card here?
Yeah, basically, like, because Green's Z deck isn't great, so you don't really, like, even if I do go into Jiren or Frieza, it'll be like at most like once or twice. So I have space for like a lot to try like a lot of Z cards, I guess.
Gotcha.
And yeah, as you said, this is just a 1 energy 15k attacker.
Yeah, got a little bit of protection, so not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then going down to the sideboard, so it looks like you get a bit more hand control in the sideboard. So you've got 2 Whis, just a simple Empower Unison that makes your opponent pitch a card. The 4th Galactic Dynasty. Any reason this wasn't in the main? Just trying to fit cards, or?
I think like I guess for my playstyle, I don't particularly like to focus on the hand destruction route. I'd rather like try to gain as much value as I can. So that's why I play more of the Dores, because like you need a hand to dormant people, and also I didn't particularly like focusing too much on making my opponent discard because it's not great against red, and it's particularly weak against like if people were signing Dabura. I was a little bit scared of that, so that's why I don't like focusing too much on the hand control route.
How often did you run into Deborah? I'm just curious because, you know, I think it's kind of an interesting thing where like Green is pretty underplayed. So like people don't side Deborah because they don't respect Green. But if they come across Green, they might run into a problem if they don't have Deborah. You know what I mean? So like, how often did you actually run into Deborah?
I didn't run into Deborah at all, which was pretty good.
Oh, that's a
it
good
meant
run,
that
yeah.
it meant that I didn't have to side in my Koitsukais, which were like there for yellow, and for, I saw my opponent had Deborah on the side.
Gotcha. And then actually, you have your own anti-hand control. Was there a certain hand control deck you were afraid of, or you just wanted to be safe?
It's just like the main the main card I'm scared of in green is like my opposing like faded rival combos, and this is mainly just for that, I guess.
Gotcha. Did you actually face any green mirrors or no?
No, I did not. No green mirrors.
Gotcha. But I think it's definitely better to be safe than sorry. Then we have 2 copies of Boo, Thwarting the Enemy. This is really cool because I think this kind of got showcased in like a lot of the Sin Shenron decks where they're playing it as a free negate just because of their Unison, and you're obviously playing a super Unison based deck. So again, like this is a card that I can't even see in the main board, but how did you feel about it? What did you bring it in against?
I brought this in against my red matchup, so I was like Vegeta. I would definitely bring this in against Sin and Gogeta because having an early negate just is really important. Like against Sin to stabilize, and against Gogeta to deny to help limit their draws. I also brought this in a lot against Crimson because I found that deck is actually really aggressive, and like it has potential to be really aggressive.
Yeah, I agree for sure. Yep.
Just with their sheer combo power and also like their playstyles, I guess. So sometimes I did need a hard negate with to go alongside my dormant, and sometimes Neats is great early game because it gets a Unison on board, but that can be backfire because you don't want to replace your Golden Frieza with like a 10k Unison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You know, I think with what you were talking about before, where you just like want to like dormant block and then like, you know, deal with the final attack, this is awesome because it's another free negate that deals with the second attack, right? So if I mess around with this deck, I might try to work 4 into the main board. I don't know. It seems kind of crazy, but we'll see what we can do. But yeah, so sideboard, the rest of it. So we have the 3rd Dodoria. Probably great against Gamma, right? Any other matchups you're bringing this card in against?
Actually, a lot of blue matchups. So it's really good against the Beerus Z battle card.
True.
Because that's if I drop the faded rivals, that's blue's probably way to out it. So and this is just like a really good answer to it.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, this card's really good against blue.
Yeah, and I also ran this card because for all the ramp decks like Beerus ramp and Android 16, the ones that rely on like a 2-cost like objection. So what you can do, even if you're going second, you can swing with lead, take life player Unison, and just hold that one up for Dodoria to like deny their turn 2 ramp.
True, yeah. That we're actually doing the same thing in our Crimson deck with with Desperate Measures. So yeah, that's definitely a super valid play. All right, then we have one copy of Goku the Furious and one copy of Deity's Wrath. I don't know, just that 1 and 1, it seems a little inconsistent. Did you wish you had more, or what was the thought here?
I was like, I think I didn't test enough for the Crimson matchup. I didn't know what to put in for those, so that was like a kind of like a last minute side. But honestly, they hardly came up. I'd probably cut them.
Gotcha. So not super necessary.
Yeah.
And then 2 copies of Big Amor. So what's your thoughts on Big Amor versus just playing Shin Noble Supremacy? Obviously, Big Amor can be used any turn, but it doesn't draw a card. It's an extra card. So what are your thoughts about this versus Shin?
I think I just prefer the Big Amor because a lot of times with Shin, it's like if you draw it after turn 3, it's like after your turn 3, it can be kind of dead. It's also not a green card, so it's harder to charge. You can't pitch it off dormant. So yeah, I think I prefer Big Amor, and in a way, Big Amor's also like more restrictive against like decks like Red Vegito because they basically can't attack with like anything.
True. Yeah, they can't attack with their 5-drop either, and that's a pretty big source of pressure for them for sure. And then Dark Death Ball, what are you bringing this in against?
So it's just like one or something against SS3.
Gotcha. Yeah, this card's really cool because especially a deck like this, like, yeah, in this deck you can combo with your Unisons technically, but I was trying this card out in Green Gotenks where you can just like pitch dead cards and counterplay, and it costs you cards from hand, but it saves you on momentum, which I think is really, really good.
Yeah.
And then 2 Koitsukai, what are you thinking about this card?
Yeah, great for my yellow matchups to turn off like Riposte and like block and negates. It's also really good against block and negates and like the anti-hand destruction cards. Also, I guess because one of Golden Frieza's weaknesses is block and negates, so that's why this is a good way to turn it off. And it's also probably one of the reasons why I'd normally save up my -4, especially if I'm not against like especially if I'm against a deck that like runs block and negates, which is like every color except for blue, basically.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Awesome, man. So that goes through the whole deck. Any final thoughts on it you want to share?
Yeah, like it's a pretty fun deck to play. Yeah, like you're mainly just pressuring with Faded Rivals, like holding up, like you have a lot of interactions with your counterplays and Dormant. And yeah, it's like very fun deck to and pressure opponent, and can be surprisingly aggro at times.
Awesome, man. Any shout outs you want to throw out there?
Yeah, shout out to my brother for my brother David for all the support he's given me. The other guys at who I saw at Nats, Max, John, some of the local guys, Jono and Arnold and Dean, who also made top 16. Yeah, and also the Americans that came, like Robert Ricci and Marcus Cantasi. They played super well, made the event pretty fun. It was a shame that they, like from my perspective, that they snagged the win, but yeah, it's great having them there.
Gotcha, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. Congratulations once again, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.